Many of you are coming from around the world. Welcome, welcome. We are so thrilled that you are here with us tonight. And we know that many of you are setting this time aside, and we are so thrilled that you are with us. Also, I want to thank our sponsors and our donors who make this webinar possible, and invite our partners and donors to continue to assist us in helping us put on these webinars and to put on the events that we do through Influence Lab Women. We've got many of them coming up, and we'll be talking about those at the end of the show. But know that we have our next webinar on September the 13th with Maisha Reynolds. That will be on equality and social justice, and what's the Christian viewpoint on that, and how can we see that from a biblical spiritual aspect in today's culture, where we're just constantly in battles for our gender equality, our racial equality in so many different ways, and how can we navigate that well. So join us on September 13th for that one. Don't forget to mark that one on the calendar. We'll be doing an in-person gathering here in Hollywood on October the 15th. Save that date. And a small in-group gathering, the Inspire events that are small relational gatherings that will be happening. So all of that comes through the journal. If you're not getting the journal, you need to be getting the Influence Lab Journal Weekly. That will have all of these announcements and events in them. So again, you can go to influencelab.com and pick up that journal. It's free. And we invite you to come along and join us. We'll be also establishing and launching a Bible study program in the fall and a full-on mentorship program in January. So you need to know about these things. If you're in media, entertainment, arts, or leadership, you need to be with us with the Influence Lab. It's about the community and about a relationship with you that we want to have with you, and that we want to see you flourish within God's kingdom. So tonight, I'm excited again to bring on Victoria Slater. Victoria has spent over 20 years in the entertainment industry. Her career has taken her to foreign lands and on sets in many of the Hollywood studios here in Hollywood, on feature films and projects, negotiating her way all the way through them. These negotiation deals took her to 20th Century Fox's mega blockbuster disaster film Volcano. She also worked with Paramount on Star Trek VII Generations and on Baywatch. She spent a year in South Africa with TransWorld Pictures as a production executive and the director of development for them. And while she was there, she negotiated distribution and studio deals and oversaw production and feature films. She was a proud and is a proud member of the Producers Guild of America, where she served on the PGA board for 9 years and then chaired their mentoring program for over 7 years. In 2007, Victoria was awarded the prestigious AP Council Commitment Award for her service to the Producers Guild. So we are excited, and I hope that you will give me a warm welcome where you are sitting today to Victoria Slater. Come on, Victoria.
Hello.
Hi, how are ya?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Good. You're coming to us from your offices there, and we are so thrilled to have you with us tonight. You've written this incredible book. It's not very long, but very, very focused and powerful. And so we are excited to have you share your background a little bit with us. So we're just going to start out with that question tonight. Tell us a little bit about your background. I read your bio, but that's, just kind of those, focused things. Tell us a little bit about you, a little bit where you are, and how did you go about writing this book? What was your passion about writing this book for?
Well, I started negotiating when I was a kid. My father was in the Air Force, so we lived in Spain when I was like 9 to 14, and we would go to the Madrid flea market and I would watch him bargain. And I thought, my allowance will go a little further if I do the same thing. And so that's what started it. And then when I worked in the film industry, you negotiate everything. And I would learn along the way. And I just seemed to have a natural knack for it. And like everything else that God gives us as a gift, I think it's our responsibility to share that gift. And I used to tell my girlfriends, about the things that I negotiated, and they go, wow, I can't believe you. How did you do that? And so I would explain it. And then they started getting into situations where they would give me a call and say, this is about what's about to happen. What would you do? And I would give them advice. And then finally, one friend said, you should write a book. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do that. And so I did, and had a very dear friend who's a writer edit it for me. And the reason why it is short is because I wanted it to be so easy to read, so quick and easy. And I made it small so that you can put this in your purse and have it available. And even though anybody can use these tips, I wrote this for women. And so that's where we are today. And thankfully,
Awesome.
Amazon has made publishing so easy. So there you go.
Awesome. Okay, so give us some of those tips. You've had these lifelong lessons, and we know these lessons can apply to all parts of our life and our career. So give us maybe a couple first lessons. What would be the first lesson or the first tip you might want to share with us tonight?
Okay, well, I'll give a couple. The main one is, and this sounds so simple, ask.
Yeah, gotta ask.
Yeah, so many people, they don't ask. And I worked with a very wealthy Dutch filmmaker, and he's the one that sent me to South Africa. And he said, the no you have, the yes maybe you can get. And it was like, I love it. It was, Kathleen, it was life transforming. I have used that my entire life because it is so true. The no you already have. So why not ask for the yes?
Why not? Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how easy that yes can be.
Yeah. Then, I think you said too in the book, which I love, you said, you don't ask, you don't get, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't ask, you don't get.
Exactly.
And I loved how you made the analogy of a football player. A football player goes in there and he signs his contract and he says, okay, I'm going to sign to be on this contract. And he knows he's going to get hit. So sometimes, even though we are afraid to begin to ask for something, we should go in and say, hey, I may get hit, right? I may be a football player. I've signed up for the contractor on the contract. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the questions I get from women a lot is, well, what if I offend somebody? Well, okay. For one thing, there's a way to do it without offending. And that's what my book teaches, is how to do it with a sense of humor, do it without being mean or aggressive or outrageous or whatever. You can do it as your own sweet self. And then I'll give you another one of my tips. It's tip number, let me see, 6.
Yes.
It's my secret spice, my secret sauce. And that is, have a reason. So say you're an entrepreneur and you're starting up a business and you're going to a vendor and you need things from this vendor, but you can't afford their price. You can go in and say, look, here's my deal. This is where I'm at. And I would love to use you. I hope to use you in the future, but I cannot afford your current prices. But this was what I could afford. and start there. Um,
Yeah.
I'm saving for a trip for my grandparents to go to Europe. You know,
Right.
the only thing I say about that with have a reason is never lie. But you'd be surprised. We're all human beings. There was a study done about negotiating and there were people standing in a bank line, and people would go in as an experiment and say, may I get in front of you because I'm in a hurry, or because my car only has 15 minutes on the meter, or any excuse. And people would say, oh yeah, sure. So it's amazing how well having a reason works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the why, isn't it? I love that. I love that tip that you pulled out, because it's about getting your ducks in a row. It's about being prepared. And I've often said in the production world, you have to over prepare to be prepared. And so just making sure that we have our ducks in a row, right? And that you are just willing to make that ask and not be afraid to have someone push back on you, and if you have the right reason, they won't, will they? They just won't.
Well, you would be incredibly surprised. All I'm saying is try it. You will be amazed.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about having your ducks in a row is tip number 2, know what you want.
Yes.
And because you know what you want, you know when you're ready to walk away, to where that is not acceptable to me. Deal done. I'm going to walk away. And you would be surprised again when you start to walk away, how many people say, oh, well, wait a minute, maybe we can work something out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's good. And to not walk away or be arrogant about it, right? I mean, sometimes we can get our nose out of joint, maybe if someone pushes back on us a little bit, but that kind of ruins our negotiation platform, doesn't it? It allows us not to come back and negotiate further, or to continue to negotiate in a different way. And so the idea is to know our self-worth and to know who we are. And I think that's one of the keys to Victoria as Christians, and as understanding who God's called us to be, and understanding who we are in Him, is having that inner confidence in knowing that, you know, we may get some pushback from time to time, but it doesn't change who we are, doesn't change our worth and our value. And,
your
and
world
so
is not going to end. You're not going to crumble. Maybe your feelings hurt a little bit, but you will live.
Yeah, exactly. So talk to us as we're talking about that. Let's kind of move into body postures and our language that we use. I mean, you talked about looking people in the eye. Can you explain that a little bit more, and what we do right and what we do wrong in not looking at people in the eye?
Sure. I'm a strong believer in a firm handshake and looking someone in the eye, and you will be amazed at the difference in respect you get by doing that. So I have a very firm handshake. I've always hated the dead fish handshake. And so, you know, I'll go out and I'll give somebody and oh, wow, you've got a great handshake, you know?
Yeah.
And then looking them in the eye, and that says that I have self-respect. I respect you as well. We are here to do a deal and negotiate, and let's get down to business. As opposed to, oh gosh, I'm not really anybody, and I'll accept whatever you have to offer, and gosh, you know, you can see the difference right there.
Yeah. And you lose your positioning and your confidence. They are not confident in who you are. Then again, going back to that earlier thing that we just talked about having that inner confidence and that worth that we have within us. I love that. And I love the fact that so often we as women don't do this well, that men tend to negotiate a lot better than we do. We tend to kind of pull back from time to time and think, well, maybe we don't have, all the qualifications we need. Maybe I'm not old enough, or maybe I'm too old for the position. So we hear all these voices in our heads. And so knowing our confidence is so important, and knowing how to look somebody in the eye and be confident in who you are, no matter what age and no matter wherever you're coming from. So important. So important.
Absolutely. There's a woman who gives a TED talk, and she says, essentially, fake it until you make it. And that's what she did. And it's so true. I'm not saying it's easy, because sometimes it is hard. And maybe you're in a room with, let's say, entertainment industry, and there's some high-powered executives in there, and you think, oh, holy cow. But you just hang in there, and you look in the eye, and you just try it, do it, and see the difference it makes.
Yeah. You can't let them intimidate you at all, because those situations can be very intimidating. And God has called us to have peace of mind, hasn't he? And to be able to walk in his confidence when we don't feel confident within ourselves. We have him to lean on when we are in those situations, and to walk in that confidence. It's so interesting too, I think, Victoria, because I think in many ways, a lot of Europeans, a lot of Middle Eastern ethnicities, a lot of people in different countries, when I've traveled all over the world, they're used to what we call haggling. They're used to negotiating. Yes. They've been brought up that way, but somehow or another, us Americans aren't very good at it from time to time.
Yeah, it is a cultural thing. And I was going to say before about going in with confidence, I just love Psalm 139. And I forget which verse it is, but it's, you are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes.
I just love that. And if we just keep that in mind, and we go into those rooms, into those negotiations with that, I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that scripture too. Explain, you talked in the book a little bit about bundling, about separating a package sometimes when you're presented a contract or a deal, and maybe us reassembling the packages. Talk to us a little bit about what you meant about understanding how we can negotiate and bundle or unbundle things.
Yeah, and that all depends on, what the situation is, but sometimes, like for instance, you go in, you've had your car repaired, and there's always a list of things. And so you can say to the mechanic, hey, I'm a good customer, and what if we take this piece, and can we get that for $10, $15 less? And what about this piece? Can we shave some of that off? So you're taking the pieces and you're carving them out, and then you put them back together. Or say you're an entrepreneur and you are going to a vendor and you're buying a whole bunch of things from them. And so you say, look, I'm buying all these things. Let's shave the bottom line off. Give me 25% discount, new customer discount, or favorite customer discount, or whatever, but some way. And you do it with a sense of humor and respect for that other person. So that's the difference between those two. So you can you just have to judge the situation, what works best.
Yeah. Well, and also, sometimes we forget when we're negotiating for a new job that we get benefits, right?
Yes.
And so you talked a little bit in the book about that, about how we need to negotiate some of our benefits, and how that would particularly work. Sometimes we can add some benefits to it that would sweeten the deal. What was the story? I think you had a story in there in the book about a job situation where you had bundled some things together or unbundled something. I forget what the story was.
It was for Star Trek Generations. In addition to the salary, you got what was called a kit fee, for bringing a computer, your own computer. They don't have to buy you a computer, you bring your own. So I didn't have a computer. So I negotiated that they paid me the entire kit fee for the production. And that way I was able to buy the computer with the kit fee.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so often in the movie studios, I know that stars, for instance, usually have their base salary, and then they come in with all their perks on top of it, right? And they have to bundle and unbundle things. And sometimes their perks can end up being kind of close to what they've actually paid for their salary in many ways.
Yeah,
and,
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting position to be in when you're accountant on some of these studios and negotiating with some of the star deals and stuff. And I'm sure you've had a lot of experience with that.
Oh yeah.
So, also going back a little bit to negotiating, you talked about curbing our anger when things don't go well, and that we should use humor. So often, again, men, because they seem to be less emotional. We women, again, tend to be a little bit more emotional from time to time. We also tend to backtrack a little bit and pull ourselves out of deals that men, often negotiate fairly and usually can do so without raising any kind of anger. But then women have a tendency to let it hurt their feelings a little bit. So not staying offended and not if we're insulted is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. And Kathleen, it is hard for us. It's the way we're built. And that's the beauty of us. So we can't, ignore and squash that. But what we can do is be aware. And sometimes you just have to walk away.
Right.
If you find yourself getting angry before those words that you cannot take back come out of your mouth, walk away. Just say,
away. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't do this right now. Let's reschedule.
Yeah.
And step away. And again, is it easy? No. But if we keep practicing these things, if we just bring them to our awareness and go, okay, not good, step away, then we get better at it.
Yes. And it is a practice thing, isn't it, Victoria? We got to practice this.
Absolutely. It's the same with self-confidence. It's the same with shaking a firm handshake and a look in the eye. It's all, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, the more confident you'll be at it. But the whole idea, and again, 79 pages, so easy to read. I'd straightforward, not a lot of verbiage. It's to get women to stick their toe in the water and give it a try, because once you do and it starts to work, you'll go, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it can change your life. It can change your finances.
It actually builds your confidence, doesn't it?
Yes. And it'll build your confidence in other things as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Often too, Victoria, we also in the medical field, or when we're looking at something for a health issue, we've been told to get a second opinion and a third opinion, but often we don't negotiate other quotes from various vendors. And so the importance of getting additional quotes is so important, isn't it?
It is. And that was especially true when I was working on a film. And usually what I do is I'd get 3. And that told me a lot, because if there was a lot of difference between the three, that meant there was some negotiating available. If they were all about the same, then I knew that that was the going rate. And yeah, I'd still try and negotiate, shave a little bit off, but I knew that that was pretty much what I was going to pay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Call a plumber, get 3 plumbers. If it's like way different, then yeah, there's some wiggle room.
Yeah. And is the lowest bid always the best?
No, you have to you have to look at that. And that's when recommendations and word of mouth and that sort of thing plays in as well. So yeah, you don't always want to go with the lowest bid, but you don't always need to go with the highest to get the best deal either.
Right. And talk a little bit about fairness in negotiation. I think sometimes we always want the best for ourselves, but it may not be fair. And as Christians, I think God calls us to be fair. He calls us to be to look at other people's misfortune and not take advantage of that, and to play fair in the play fair in the sandbox, right?
Oh yeah. As believers, we need to be a reflection of Christ to all that we encounter. That's my bonus tip number 13. There will be, and even now in our economy, when I wrote the book, the economy was great. Things were zooming, everybody was employed. And now it's a different world. So this tip applies even more so. And there you might have an opportunity where you can take advantage of somebody and be unfair because they are hurting so bad that they would do anything. And I don't feel right about that.
Yeah.
So I share, look at the situation, yes, get the best deal, but don't beat somebody up. One of the reasons is eventually you might find yourself in that same situation, and how would you want to be treated? So that's that's why I put that 13th tip is that I think I titled it, Everybody Deserves to Make a Living. And
that's right.
That includes us, and that includes everybody around us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I love what you said about meeting people in the middle sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. That's actually the advantage to us as we're negotiating for something, is that they want 5,000, you want to pay 4,000. Okay, well, they're willing to go to 450, but what if they're willing to go to 425? So you just keep having it until you reach the no. But you'd be surprised. I mean, because that's $125.
Yes.
If you do that, if you keep having it in that example.
Yeah. Well, in our economy, and since COVID too, and as prices continue to soar here, and I think we're going to see them even go up further, all arrows seem to be going in that direction. Yes. We need to just try to remember that every dollar does count, and how to go through these negotiation tips and use them so that we can be successful, not only in our career, but in our family and our life as well. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. These are just fantastic tips. But your last thought on this, Victoria, what's the last thing you'd want women to leave with? What's the one thing that you really want to leave women with tonight as they think about moving in and risking being a better negotiator in the future?
Well, I had a thought about this that I wanted to share. It's kind of a new thought, and it was, we all love a good sale. if we go into a store and we see a blouse that we've been wanting and it's 20% off, ooh, we love a good sale. Well, this negotiating is like making the sale making the sale price for yourself. So you create a discount for yourself through these negotiations. And why not? Why not? We work hard for our money, to quote a song. So why not create a discount for yourself, especially, again, by asking, you will be amazed at how much money you can save. It's astonishing. And here's one thing I like to tell people is that I like money. I don't love money, but I like money. And the reason why I like money is it gives me options. And so the money you save on something else, you can do something more special for your kids. You can put it in a savings account. You can invest in stocks. You can pay off your mortgage quicker. It frees you up by simply asking and going through these tips and using them to change your life, to change your career.
Absolutely. That's so good. That's so good. I think one last thing too that comes to mind too that we haven't really talked about is points that are non-negotiable to us. Often as an actress for years here in Hollywood and working, there were some things as an actress that were non-negotiable terms to me. And yet somehow or another, they were always asked. I would lay these things out with my agent and say, no, I'm not going to do nudity. These are the things that bother me. I don't enjoy scripts where I have to use the Lord's name in vain. I'm a Christian. These things offend me. And so I had all these things laid out with him. Don't send me cigarette commercials. I never wanted to do a cigarette commercial because I felt like that was, giving my okay to that, which I think is a harmful thing to our health. So that's just my own personal thing. I had my own boundaries, so to speak, with my agent. And yet every time it seemed like he would bring me these scripts for cigarette smoking or something that had nudity in it or something. So learning how to negotiate through those kind of things and knowing where your bounds are is so important, isn't it?
It is. And I know in the industry, it is so tempting to just, fudge a little bit because you're so hungry for the work and for the job and for this opportunity. And who knows, this one will lead to that one. You have to remember who you are in Christ. And even though sometimes that's hard to turn things down, it's so important because in the end, it's your heart, it's your soul, and it's your relationship with Christ that is more important than that. Because you know what, having worked in the industry and all these successful people, a lot of them are not happy. They are not happy people. And they have all this success, and for what? But we have the joy of the Lord.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's so important. And, they've kind of negotiated themselves or allowed themselves to be taken advantage of because, again, going back to what we talked about even earlier, not knowing their worth and knowing who they were in Christ and their identity in him first. Yeah. And I think that's really goes back to that landing page again, when we can be confident in who we are and what we stand for, and trust God that if we turn down this commercial or we turn down this film or we turn down this role, that he will then reward us in the end for choosing well. And that may not come across monetarily, but it'll come across with the confidence within ourselves and the fact that we'll be happy people, we'll be joyous people, because we won't have that guilt. When you lay down something on video these days, it lives forever. On the internet, it will live forever there, and you can't pull it back. So important. Well, we're going to kind of shift things here a little bit. Thanks so much, Victoria. I loved chatting with you. I love your tips. We're going to shift here a little bit, and then bring Ayana in from the chat room. I know that she's been bringing in some of those great questions from our attendees and our audience tonight. So, hi, Ayana, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm taking copious notes. Great conversation, and we've gotten some really good questions thus far.
Great.
So Anna has asked, sometimes we're unable to connect in person or video call. So what advice, Victoria, do you have for email-based or written negotiations?
Oh,
if they differ at all.
Not a lot. No, it's all the basics. You have to be careful with written, like via email. The tone can be different than you meant it. You might have meant it with humor, and it's not taken that way. So you have to be careful with that. But basically, go in knowing what you want, having done your research, and and then using the other tips to finesse and to get as much as you can, and be able to walk away feeling like you're okay with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Great question, though. I mean, tone is everything. And I think sometimes when you do get things over an email or a text or something like that, if that's type of a negotiation you're doing, that tone is missing. And so not, again, going there in anger or frustration if it's not read correctly is so important, isn't it?
So true. That is so true. You can't hear the voice, so sometimes that miscommunication is another opportunity.
Right.
So Leslie mentioned, you kind of touched on this in your conversation, but Leslie mentioned this idea of imposter syndrome, or just struggling with self-doubt, doubting our abilities, feeling like we're a fraud or what have you. You touched on it a bit, Victoria, but if you have any thoughts on if someone was struggling with their own value, ways to grow it, that beautiful scripture from Psalm 139, if you have any thoughts to speak to that.
Oh, sure. Well, as a believer, I always go to the Word, and it's amazing how encouraging God's love for us is. It's just so empowering as we read His promises to us and His love for us. That's one thing. This woman that I mentioned with the TED Talk, and you can probably look it up. Unfortunately, I don't remember her name, but it's like fake it till you make it. And she does these superhero poses before she goes in and does something, like stuff like that. And she said that that helped her. And so you just need to find out what works for you. Pep talk from your girlfriend, pep talk from your husband. You find out what works for you, but ultimately, you are wonderful. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, and so you deserve everything you can get, and so that just that kind of self-talk and self-encouragement, I think is
so true. Victoria, when I was acting full-time, I would often pull on the Sound of Music song that Julie Andrews would sing when she was going to visit these kids for the first time and be this nanny. And she sings this song, I have confidence in confidence. I have confidence in rain. I have confidence that spring will come again. Besides what you see, I have confidence in me. Sometimes
Love
you just have to sing to yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Singing confidence, pep talk, such great advice. Let's see what else we have here. So Deborah has asked about situations where you're being discriminated. Let's say that. So what do you do when you know you are being discriminated against because of your gender or some other reason? Do you
Oh,
confront it? Do you suggest confronting it or just seeking a better situation and moving to an inclusive environment? What are your thoughts?
yeah, that's a toughie. And I remember early in my career, as a woman, feeling that and being stuck in front of a typewriter, expected, to sit there and type versus what guys were getting. And gosh, that was frustrating. In a situation like that, having done your research, so if it's for a job and they are treating you differently than what you think you should be treated, or having done your research and knowing that the parameters for which a normal person gets paid is between X and Y, and they are offering you over here, then you can say, well, I have done my research, and my understanding is that for this position, one normally gets paid at least X. And I bring to the job additional things, so I think that I should be paid here. And so that's a way to overcome that, because you come in informed. Now, if it's not about money, but it's about how you are being treated and you are being discriminated against, then yeah, walk away, because that person doesn't deserve you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to self-worth again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And which brings me as a reminder to our viewers that we will be talking about that equity question and that those gender issues on our next webinar on September 13th. So make sure you've saved that date, because we're going to address some of those issues too, and be able to answer those questions a little bit more in depth. So last question, Ayana.
Okay, last question. So we've gotten through some really great areas, and I was asked about where to get your book, Victoria, and also, and there were some questions about, do you direct? We know you've been in the business, but yeah, where can we get your book, and any where can we get your book, purchase your book, any website, etc.?
It's on Amazon, available on Amazon.com, and it's available in paperback and Kindle. And it's $10. I made it inexpensive so that anybody can afford it. And I can pretty much guarantee that if you use any one of these tips, you will get your money back and more from this book. I'm not good at social media. I'll be developing a website. I've told I need to do that. I'm dragging my feet, but eventually I will have a website. And I have a Facebook page, which I think they put up. So if you have feedback for me, or if you want to, I created the Facebook page so that people could share their victories and encourage one another, because what I'm trying to do is start a movement. And so we need to encourage one another with our successes. So
there you go. Yep, we got it up.
Go to my Facebook page and tell me what you think about this webinar, and if you have any suggestions, and if you've tried the book and you've had some successes, share that with your sisters out there.
Great. Well, thanks so much for Victoria. It's been fabulous being with you. I want to kind of take the last few minutes here tonight and kind of give us a spiritual perspective on what what God can actually teach us on negotiation and how he's taught us. You know, many of us from time to time have probably bargained with God. If you help me win the lottery, if you help me get this job, if you help me make this movie deal, then I will do this. Or maybe we've bargained the other way and said, well, you know, God, don't let me get caught at this. And if I don't get caught, I'll do this for you. Or if you can get me out of this situation, I'll do this for you. And so often too, when we pray and we fast for things, we are bargaining in the wrong way with God. We're giving the wrong reasons. Usually they're ours, and they're usually on our end. You know, there's several biblical stories in the Bible. Abraham, for instance, bargained with God when he was talking to him about saving Sodom and Gomorrah. Jacob wrestled with the messenger of God and didn't let loose of him. And we've all perhaps tried to negotiate again from time to time with God. So what are those lessons that we can learn? Well, first, I believe that we have to know that that God will negotiate things with us, that we can bargain with him, but we have to do it on his terms. We have to do it in the right way. You know, Joshua asked God to stop or hold back the sun, and he did that. He was negotiating with God on his terms and not on Joshua's terms. We need to know that God doesn't need us for anything, and or that he doesn't need us to give him anything, that he is the giver of gifts and he is the giver of favors, and that every good gift comes from him. So I want to leave you a little bit with some homework tonight. I want you to go back and spend some time tonight and read the story of Jephthah. It's in the 11th chapter of Judges. Jephthah was a warrior of God. He helped save the Israelites, but he has a very interesting story and then how he negotiated with God. You see, we have to know a little bit about his background. Jephthah was abandoned by his mother as a child and sent to a foreign land where he observed child sacrifices that were done to idol gods all around him. And so he was raised with a different viewpoint. So we have to understand the perspective that he was coming from. He was also shunned by his Jewish community. He was thrown out because of his beliefs. But then they needed him because he was such a warrior, and they brought him back and asked him to come back and save them from the Ammonites who were invading their land. Jephthah then knows that he must bargain with God, in that he needs something from God. He can't do it within his own strength. And so he asks for God's protection and help. And he says to God, he says, if you give me victory, when I return from my victory, when I return home, whoever runs out of my house at first, the first person that runs out of my house, I will sacrifice to him. You see, he'd gone back to this perspective that God was needing a sacrifice. You see, God doesn't need a sacrifice from us. He needs our obedience. And so God does give him the victory. And so often we are perplexed by this and why God would then continue to give him the victory. And it's because God's ultimate plan was for his people to be saved. And he was using Jephthah to be able to do that. It had nothing really to do with this bargain that he had presented to the Lord. And so tragically, the first person that runs out of the house when he returns from war and he's been this big victor is his daughter. And his daughter then is to be this person who has to be sacrificed. So again, we have to keep this perspective in line. How can a good God be asking us to sacrifice and to follow through with that? Well, it wasn't really Jephthah's decision. It was the daughter's decision. It was her willingness then to go through and allow herself to be sacrificed. She bargained herself with God and said, I will do this, God, but please allow me to go up to the mountains with my friends and to find my peace and to have a time with you and a time of growing and learning of who I am in you. And so she eventually is allowed to do this. God allows her to do that, again, because she's obedient. Had nothing to do with her sacrifice, but again, her obedience. And there's a greater lesson here to learn, in that, again, God asks us to be obedient. He asks us to have a relationship with him. She wanted that relationship with him and the time to be able to have that with him, and God honored that with him. You know, Jesus was obedient all the way to the cross. One of my favorite scriptures is Hebrews 5:8, that says, even though he was God's son, Jesus learned obedience through his suffering. So sometimes God makes us suffer. Sometimes in some of the life situations, the contract situations, the career situations, we feel like we're suffering, but God is asking us to be obedient, and that he will honor that for us. It says to seek ye first the kingdom, and then all these things will be added unto him. And then God goes on to tell us in James 4:8 that we are to draw near to him. And in 1 Peter 5:6-7, it says to humble ourselves, and that he will exalt us in the right time, or at the right time. So these lessons are important lessons for us to learn in how we can negotiate with God and what we're actually asking God. You know, I love, again, how that God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. And so it was God asking for that sacrifice, where in Jephthah's case, he bargained with God and told God he would do the sacrificing, not God. So know how God will then reward us through our obedience and not through our sacrifice, and how we can best negotiate with him. So that would be kind of your lesson tonight. Go do some research in Judges 11, read that story, let it seep into your heart, and ponder how God is asking you to be obedient sometimes, even maybe in our suffering, even maybe when our negotiations don't go so well, and how we can negotiate better with him through our prayer and fasting, and through our relationship with him. So I hope that was helpful to you tonight. We want to bring Victoria back one more time and thank her. Have a great evening, and we'll see you on September 13th for the next Influence Lab webinar. God bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.